Hello, my friend. I'm glad you're here. Dave Temple, your host of The Thriller Zone. And on today's 231st episode, I have a debut author that has blown me away. You're going to hear me geek out on this show, and it's something I do from time to time. And for those of you who have been writing in going, can I please get on the show? We have been turning away some debut authors because of a number of different reasons, but I handpick everyone every once in a while, and I welcome on the show. And there's a myriad of reasons why I can't do tons of debuts, but this guy, Thomas Trang, has written a book called Dark Neon Dirt. Holy bananas. This thing is smoking. It's so good. Man, when you run across a debut author, now he's written some short stories, but a debut author like this, you know that he is primed for huge success. Shotgun Honey, got a shout out to you coming in the show. So, Ron Phillips, we need to talk. Let's get on into it with Thomas Trang right here on The Thriller Zone.
My man cave, my literary man cave, is in the process of getting put together. So it's a bit like, when you have those newscasters and, they're sitting at a desk and sort of waist up, they're in a suit and tie and they look very professional, but then underneath it's board shorts so yeah, just out of here, it's absolute chaos.
Thomas, I know exactly what you're talking about because I'm wearing a dress shirt, but I'm wearing a thong below. So
I wouldn't have expected anything less.
Oh, God, we're going to have so much fun.
This is going to be good. I can tell already.
I have been looking forward to it. And if you're ready, no pressure. This is all about, my show. It's all fun.
Yeah, I'm a regular listener. So yeah, I know what to expect, more or less.
More or less. It's
as long as I'm coming through loud and clear, because there's nothing worse when I'm listening to a podcast and it's usually the guest is a bit crackly, sounds like they're down the end of a well, all that sort of thing.
I'm telling you something. I had a conversation with Josh Mendoza.
Yes.
And you saw his video, which was pure shite.
Shite. I like that. Very good. Yeah. You're making me feel at home.
I'm gonna do everything I can, but I will not try the accent. It's not very good. He and I were talking. He and I are both filmmakers. He's more of a filmmaker than me, I suppose, because he's more recent. But folks, I'm just rolling. By the way, I'm gonna save some of this. We have come to the conclusion audiences will put up with shitty visuals that they get stellar audio, but they will not do the converse. Which is what you just said. I mean, you got to have good audio or people just won't listen, especially in a world of podcasts. I mean, hi.
Yeah. I mean, I'll be honest. Most of the podcasts I listen to, I don't do visual. I just put the earbuds in. If I'm on the train, I just stare out the window blankly and listen.
Speaking of that very phrase, I'm going to come to a point in the show that is one of my favorites in your book. So don't let me forget that. Ladies and gentlemen, on the show, Thomas Trang, author of, check this out, Dark Neon Dirt. Bam, my brother.
Thank you, David. It's good to be here, calling in from not so sunny London today.
Isn't it funny that San Diego experiencing their first real rain wave of the season? Here it is, June 3rd. When this airs, it'll be a few days later, and it's been raining since midnight. So crazy.
Well, they must have known I was coming on your show, so they wanted me to feel at home. My apologies.
No worries. I'm going to start out of the gate with something that you told me earlier in the green room that you were a fan, avid fan. You were listening a lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you know what a fanatic I am for book covers. One of my favorite book covers, probably in the last 6 months, easily. It just smokes. I'm going to share it here. I'm going to get it in more detail, but it just rocks. I don't know who the cats at Shotgun Honey did this, but I want to applaud them. Who did this? Bad Fido?
Yeah, that is the, I guess it's the graphic design pseudonym of Ron Phillips, who is the head honcho at Shotgun Honey. I would have said, if you go to shotgunhoney.com, you look at the back catalog, all the covers are great, and obviously mine's no exception. I used to say, I think he's a graphic designer that just started a publishing house just to make covers, but actually, it's not true because if you read the books, they're all great too. But
Yeah.
he's really good because he doesn't seem to have a definable style. Like you couldn't necessarily look at something and say, "Oh, that's bronze," because he really tailors the covers to the vibe and what's going on in the book. And he's very good about getting feedback from the authors as well. We went back and forth, and I had some different ideas. Thankfully, he ignored most of them because I have to admit, I leave it to the experts. My suggestions were a little bit more. Well, it's called dark neon and dirt. It's got to have neon, and it's got. I had that very well-worn LA neon at night kind of image in my head. And he said, "Oh, that's good. That's great." And then he came back with that. And I said, "You know what? That's even better." it's, it's absolutely perfect because it looks like well, not regular, but you look at it and you say, it's a crime novel. It's dark. But there's something to it that just gives it a little bit of an edge. I don't know. I don't know what it is. I think, book covers are a little bit like that definition of pornography. So I can't really tell you what it is, but I know it when I see it. And yeah, that's how that came out. It was really good.
It just flat out does not miss. And I want you to introduce me. I should have thought of this earlier. I guess I'm just been overwhelmed. Please introduce me to Ron Phillips because I want him on the show. I geek out about his work. I've had how many authors from Shotgun Honey on the show? Matter of fact, when I was starting the show, I think I had more Shotgun Honey people than anything else. So please introduce us. Tell him I want him on the show. There.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I'm sure he'd be thrilled to do it.
Now, I'm going to massacre this, and I'm going to be all over the place because I have so much to say to you, but Phi Fong Tavan.
Oh, Fifung Tavan. Yes,
Okay, I was kind of close.
you were pretty close. Yeah.
Okay. Who is that?
That is my uncle who passed away about 8, 9 years ago, I want to say. And so I dedicated the book to him. That's that's at the top of the book.
I love that.
And it was just one of those things because and maybe we'll get into this in a bit more detail later. I spent a lot of my teenage years, childhood in Paris, living with various aunts and uncles and so forth there. And he is, he was, my aunt's husband, and he was a big crime guy, as it turns out. Like he used to watch a lot of Miami Vice, a lot of reruns, and think NYPD Blue. He was mad for NYPD Blue when that was on. So I'm maybe aging myself here.
Great show.
Great show. Yeah, he was a big David Caruso guy.
David.
More than David Caruso is a David Caruso guy, I think.
Is that possible?
Well, I don't know how he was with CSI Miami. We never had that discussion. But yeah, when it came time to dedicate the book to someone, it just made perfect sense. And actually, I've had a lot of family members that have picked up the book out of curiosity or to see whether they're mentioned in passing. And when they see that, they're blown away. So yeah,
Well,
it's a nice thing.
good. I'm glad I started there because before I get into the book and what I think about the book, I wanted to get to know you because, quite frankly, folks, if you go search Thomas Trang online, you're not going to find a lot about him. Here's what you get. Thomas Trang is a Vietnamese author currently living in London after stints in Paris, Sydney, New York, and Singapore. That's it. No, Thomas enjoys fine wine and quiet walks along the ocean side with friends on sunny afternoons, or anything like that. I mean, there's.
No, I do all that, but no, I kept it brief. I don't know why. I think
Well, you're either
modesty.
modest.
Yeah.
You're either modest or running from the law.
Yeah. It could be both. I've got a couple of writer friends who always joke that they say, "Oh, Trang, he must be a spy because when you talk to him, I lived here, I lived there, and he seems to know a lot about a lot, and you can't really pin him down." And they say, oh, what do you do for a day job? I work in shipping, and they said that's just so vague that can't be real. So yeah, it is. I think sometimes with that sort of stuff, maybe less is more. At least for me. I think maybe if I keep putting out books and building up a catalog, then maybe more of myself comes out that way. But I think my personality, it's all in the book.
Yeah.
Obviously, the biographical details are slightly different, but I think,
Yeah.
as with most authors, the characters are all some sort of part of their personality.
Right. What you know.
Yeah.
But wait a minute. Are you literally in shipping?
Yeah, I work for a shipbroker, um, which is more or less like a real estate agent for ships. So anything
Okay.
from I want a ship to go from port A to port B, or I want to take a ship for 5 years on contract. I want to build a ship. I want to actually scrap a ship and get money for the steel and everything. So we've got our grubby fingers in all parts of the chain there, and we get a commission. And that's the entire business model.
So it begs the question, how does one go from being an employee in the shipping business to writing thrillers? Now, before you answer that, I don't mean that like, well, Dave, do you think because you are a radio announcer, you got to write about radio? I guess what I'm getting at is I don't think I've ever spoken to a writer who is in the shipping business. So there is that first thing. But second of all, I think it's interesting that you would be in a business that's so one side of the brain, and while you're creating your world is one other side of the brain, which is maybe wherein lies the magic.
I've always been writing. I think it's probably the other way around. I think the writing and reading has always been there. The shipping is a more recent thing. Previous to that, I was working in oil refining and chemicals and that sort of thing. So that's what I do within the shipping side of things. But yeah, I think you come out of college and you get a job where you can, and I can always write to a certain degree, and so you end up in journalism. But you think, oh, there's no money in journalism, and they said, well, have you tried business journalism, and so on and so forth, and then you end up working at the world's largest shipbroker. So that's and yeah, that's how that came about. But I think it works in a way because my background, I've moved around a lot. I've lived in a lot of different places. So perhaps the global aspect of shipping suits my background and the way I think.
That's perfect because you do have a universal appeal, and there's a very large world inside dark neon dirt. So you said something that again was one of my questions. So I'm going to give you a two-parter. How long have you been writing, and who do you suppose has been your biggest influence?
Um, well, I guess I've been writing for a very long time, since I was a kid or in high school, but it was never something that I took that seriously, because I think at that age you just write and it's fun. And there's a big difference between writing a novel or writing short stories as a 12, 13-year-old and writing a novel of 80,000 words, 100,000 words. I didn't have the discipline that's required. I mean, who does at 13?
Sure.
Um, and then it was something that got parked, I guess. I was always a reader. But then, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 years ago, I thought, you know what? Let's give it a real go. And I think the first couple of short stories were terrible. And then, like anything, you just keep working at it, and you read a lot, and you learn from reading, and you learn what to do and what not to do. Um, and then you slowly figure out the stories that you want to tell, because I think that's the other thing. You can learn to write and write reasonably well, but the trick is to write in your own voice. And I think that took a long time for me because I was so enamored with other writers. I thought, well, I have to write like them. I think probably the biggest one was Elmore Leonard when I was first starting out. A lot of people have said, "Oh, your dialogue is really strong and it sounds great and it sings." And I think, well, that's just Elmore Leonard. I learned from the best. And I think if people are going to accuse you of, oh, well, you sound like Elmore Leonard, it's like if you play the trumpet and someone says, well, you just sound like Miles Davis. I said, stop, I'll take it. That's fine.
Yeah, yeah. I was going to say, if I got either one of those compliments, I would be the happiest guy in town. Now, here's the interesting thing. I often make my notes, and these are my notes on you.
Mm.
I make
Oh, wow,
my
that's a
note.
lot.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. There's two things. I make my notes, and then I have to go back and type them because I can't read my handwriting. But right down here, and I'm going to give you a blurb. I'm just started doing this on books that I really like. If Elmore Leonard and Don Winslow co-wrote Heat meets Den of Thieves, you would have Dark Neon Dirt.
I'll take it. Absolutely. I mean, Don Winslow, I was going to mention his name because he's another one who I think I discovered him around the time of Savages, which is really when he started to pop off. But obviously he'd been writing, like a lot of overnight successes, he'd been doing it for many years before then. But yeah, there's something about not necessarily his dialogue, which is great, but for me, what I took from Don Winslow was just the brevity of style and it's similar to Elmore Leonard when I was reading them and thinking about how I wanted to write. You read guys like that and you realize like, wow, you can just do certain things because they've done them, and you don't have to dance around with adjectives and adverbs and all this sort of stuff. You can just boom, 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 just write in a really punchy way. And I think that's probably still come through because a lot of people have said, mentioned Don Winslow as a comparison. And again, I'll absolutely take that.
Well, dude, I don't think I have compared any writers on this show to Don Winslow. Don Winslow, I'm very grateful to say, has become a good friend. He lives about an hour from here.
That's right. He's in San Diego, isn't he?
And Julian, we struck up a conversation and a conversation at a book signing years ago. Then I followed him to every book signing, and somehow we just connected, went out to lunch, and we've been friends ever since. And he is, in my opinion, for what it's worth, one of the best writers of the 21st century. And when I was reading your work, and I'm an enormous Elmore Leonard fan, back to 52 pickup or even earlier than that. And I thought, this cat's got that kind of thoroughbred status woven through him. And that brevity and punchiness is what makes this book sing like a opera.
Mama Jamma.
Mama Jam. I was thinking that very similarly. Right. Now, you're writing, the fact that you're a debut author. Now, when I say debut, you're a debut novelist.
Yes.
But your writing far exceeds your time in this business. Because I have read, as you have known, listening to the show, where, let's see. Oh, as I say this, our show hits the 4th year next week. And I have not read a debut book like this in those 4 years.
Wow. That's the most flattering thing anyone's said about my book so far. I'm not sure, I'm not quite sure what to say. Oh, thank you. I think it was just one of those things where I worked at it. And certainly when I signed the contract with Shotgun Honey, that was the end of 2023. And because publishing moves at the speed that it does, it didn't come out until earlier, I think it was March this year. So I had a good year and a bit. And even then, I was still tinkering with little words. I can sharpen this, I can do this, I can do that. And Ron, bless him, at a certain point, he just had to say, look, stop, leave it. It's got to go to print. And he said, when we're done, you get one more look at it, but just trust the process, and I think, and I guess a lot of authors will tell you the same thing. You can overcook something, you can
Yeah.
overdo it in terms of the edits. Because at a certain point, I was saying, well, what if we took the out of this sentence, or things like that.
Y-
But yeah,
Yeah,
that was very much by design. So yeah, when people like you tell me things like that, and other reviews and readers have come back to me and said, they're really blown away by it. Obviously, that's very gratifying.
well, I'm not done yet. Um, yeah,
Keep going. This is great.
these are some of my notes. Your myriad of references is
Mm.
stunning. I mean, you have clearly been quite the student of American culture and trends because it shows in every single paragraph. Your reference to iconic movies, iconic songs, TV shows, colloquialisms are spot on and deftly inserted without distraction because they feel more like habits without drawing attention. And I think that may be your biggest gift. The way that you can get in there, you can tell that you've drafted it and then cut out all the nonsense or the pieces that don't matter because it is so minimalistic. It's still clocking at 300 pages, which is to
Mm.
me the kind of the perfect length. But it is so sparse, but gritty and dark, but then light and heart. I mean, the way you are able to do that juggling, whether you want to say juggle or spin plates, either one works. You do it with such reckless abandon, and I'm just so stinking impressed.
Well, thank you. I think that's the magic trick as an author. You want to work really hard at something and have it seem natural or effortless, I suppose. So I know when people, and myself and other authors, when someone comes to you and says, "Oh, this book was great. I read it in overnight. I just couldn't put it down." Part of you just thinks, "Oh, that's wonderful," and then another part of you, if you're honest, is, "Oh, I spent sometimes up to years working on that book, and you just dash through it in one night." So it's a bit of a catch-22, I suppose. But I think if people are enjoying it, and I mean, the thing about the references, and a lot of people have mentioned that, because as you can probably tell, I'm not American. Um, but I grew up very much absorbed and drowning in US culture, I suppose. Films and TV, uh, authors. We mentioned Elmore Leonard, obviously a lot of Stephen King before that, because that's the rules. If you're a child of the 80s and the early 90s, you have to read Stephen King. That's just how it is. And I think, yeah, I just absorbed all of that. And what you mentioned about, it's all there, but you try not to overdo it. I mean, this book, it's around, like you said, 300 pages. It's around about 75,000 words. The first draft was closer to 85, 86. And then gradually I took things out because they didn't need to be there, essentially.
They
And it's
didn't
like
push
that.
it story forward. Yeah.
Exactly. It's like that Hemingway iceberg theory. I don't know if you've heard of that, where he talks about, well, you see the tip of the iceberg, but 80, 90, 95% of it is below the surface, and you can't see it, but you know it's there, and you just instinctively know it's there. And he applied that to his writing. He said, if you know enough about what's going on with the characters and the story, you don't have to show everything, because it's implicit, and the reader, if they're really following it, will pick up on all of that. So I think that's a similar thing to what I've tried to do.
I think that you have to give your reader credit for knowing what the heck they're doing. Now,
Yeah, I mean, I've always done that. I mean, I try and write for a smart reader, essentially.
well, mission accomplished.
Thank you.
Here I am, page 9. By page 10, I'm starting to highlight. I keep
It's always good.
highlighting through. Yeah, I highlight until I finally went, okay, the fluorescent yellow is overtaking the white page. But if you don't mind, I'm gonna just, here's little lines that don't mean anything, but I'm saving it for a big crescendo here. So, guy says, still waiting. You want the preliminaries? I'm Will Smith, baby, all ears. Clever, quiet, easy. Everyone gets it instantly. All they saw was a crew wearing hockey masks. 0 points for originality. Every bozo watches Heat and then they want to dress the part. The one by the door, he was popped with a guard service weapon. The other two were taken out by a second shooter we figure has to be the missing guy. You tell me so much and so little. Anyway. Okay,
Yeah, I
here's
think
another.
that Heat reference was definitely. I remember definitely putting that in there and thinking it's almost like me as the author making a metafictional point that. I mean, he's like every bozo watches Heat and they want to dress the part because I think my book is. I mean, anyone who's read it will think, oh, okay, this guy's seen Heat and loves Heat because that
Right.
was definitely the starting off point. I thought I want to write an LA crime saga type of novel. And again, it's like Miles Davis with the trumpet. You just cannot get around Heat when it comes to that sort of story. So I rather than pretend that the film Heat does not exist in the world of the book, I tackled it directly.
See,
But again, I tried not to overdo it, but it was there.
but see, you did it in just enough in one paragraph that we already know. Okay, we know Thomas is a fan of Heat. He gave a little nod to the folks, to Pacino and De Niro, and then he moved on. Much like there's another scene that reminds me of Den of Thieves with Gerard Butler, one of my favorite movies of all time, and much better than the Den of Thieves 2. By the way, the soundtrack by Cliff Martinez, I listen to probably 20 to 30 times a week when I'm writing. I kid you not, because that's the perfect combination of rhythm and crescendo.
Did he do? You talking about the soundtrack to the first one or the second one?
The first one for sure.
First
I
one,
don't know about
okay.
the second one. And he's also the guy who did Drive with
Yeah.
Ryan
I mean,
Gosling.
Drive was definitely another influence on this book. I'm actually talking about my book, but in terms of influences and references, they actually probably more on the film side of things. It sounds like. So,
Dude, I gotta tell you something. I can sit here and we don't have enough time. I could rattle off. I mean, here's what came to mind. Yeah, Heat, Den of Thieves 1 and 2, more 1 than 2, Drive, the other Winfred movie about the preacher. I can't pull it up right now. There's a couple of ones. One with Ryan Gosling as the motorcycle rider in the circus.
Beyond the Pines. Yeah,
Place
I
Beyond the
love that
Pines.
film. Love
I
that
mean,
film.
this just drips with that noir ambiance. There's a soundbite right there. All right, I want to jump to something. I had to catch myself stopping, but when I got to a scene, it had just enough, then smattered it with a punch dialogue. In fact, I think dialogue is your mastercraft. I'm going to go to that page. What is it? 163. Folks, listen to this if you'll bear with me as I geek out over my new friend. I'm going to give you more of the paragraph, but there's a line inside here, and I want to see if you catch it. I read this thing 3 times. I had to stop and I go, dang, I like that sentence. That's how geeked out I get. Just outside of San Bernardino, where the suburban sprawl of Los Angeles finally yields to desert, Wynn pulls off the road at a Denny's for some coffee. Inside is the usual mix of people allured by the hot food and bright lights. Families with kids at the table, young couples talking and looking at their phones. Truckers that have grown roots at the counter, bullshitting with a waitress. Others with disintegrating lives and silent stares out the window at the passing traffic, either lost in memory or trying to forget. That sentence right there. Disintegrating lives and silent stares out the window at the passing traffic, either lost in memory or trying to forget. That sentence tells an entire novella. And then it follows up with a habit that I find myself doing constantly. Let me continue. He would always invent stories for the customers to pass the time in a place like this, imaging their lives and situations. Something he's always done on planes, too, fixating on lone cars moving along the road below, wondering if there was someone inside looking up and doing the same. I can't tell you how many times I've been at a cafe, at an airport, at a park, and I see people passing, and I create this whole world of their own. And that must be a writer thing,
Yeah.
but that was
Yeah.
so tasty, Thomas.
Yeah, that thank you. That I mean that part is absolutely pulled straight from my head and experience. Certainly when I used to do a lot more traveling in my day job in shipping or espionage, you spend a lot of time at airports and on your own, waiting for planes. And yeah, absolutely, I would look down at cars and that whole part of it. I'm really glad you picked up on that. Someone else, another writer I know, he pulled that same almost identical paragraph and said, I love this. This just, you could just put this out on its own and it tells so much in so little. But yeah, the line about either lost in memory or trying to forget.
Yeah.
I'll tell you a little secret, David. That was actually inspired by the Eagles song Hotel California, and I told my other friend this, and only when I told him I realized, oh, it's Hotel California, and my book
Some
said in
try to
California.
forget.
Yeah, exactly. Some dance to remember and some dance to forget.
Yeah.
So I think that is definitely where that part came from, and yeah, the rest of it is, and you'll know, all writers will know, you sit there sometimes and you just look at people watching. And you just invent stories, and what are they doing? Is that couple breaking up? What's she saying to him? What's going on there? And it's kind of a nosy thing that we do, isn't it?
I used to live in Manhattan twice. The second time was in 95. First time was in 95, 96. And this one I really started dabbling in writing. I would go to coffee shops and I would be working along, but I would purposely eavesdrop on the folks next to me. And I would pick up bits and pieces because there's two reasons. A, you can learn a lot about dialogue by the way, if you listen to the way people talk, because we speak more in brevity and almost code, a simplicity. We don't fill in all the blanks. So I love that. It's a great education. Also, it feeds ideas that I can then weave into my story. I'm not stealing their ideas. I'm not eavesdropping to, retain information. I'm just listening for patterns. I'm a big pattern guy. I don't know why my brain is wired that way, to listen for patterns and see it. But don't you find yourself doing the same thing with homework?
All the time. It's very much like you say, you don't necessarily lift these conversations wholesale, but you'll hear certain things and the rhythms of speech, and it'll jumpstart something of your own imagination. My wife is a big eavesdropper as well. She absolutely loves it. I don't think she'll mind me saying this. And then, I remember once we were on the Eurostar. It's got to be 15 years ago, and we listened to some lady who was, I think, talk about disintegrating lives, and the way she was talking to her husband about, I felt bad even listening to this, but they weren't being quiet about it, shall we say. And even to this day, it's one of those little in-jokes that couples have. We'll reference that one conversation and about this woman who was from Albuquerque, New Mexico. I can't believe I still remember this. But yeah, there's always little things like that, the nuances. I think with the dialogue, other than the cultural references and all that stuff which you highlighted before, there's always, part of me always really works on the rhythm of the sentences, almost as if they're music in a way. So you can add words, remove words, and it will change the whole flow. And I think that also ties into character as well, because the way someone will say something is not the way I would say a certain thing is not the way that you would say a certain thing. And that really helps to build the characters, because I think for me, especially with all fiction, but if we're talking about crime and thrillers, I'm a firm believer that it's character, because the plot is the plot. And for me, it's almost like just a scaffolding to get from one page to the next. And I worked very briefly at a nonfiction publishing house many years ago, and one of their big titles was 7 Basic Plots, I think it was called. And the argument is, as you can imagine, that there are only 7 stories essentially, and all stories since the dawn of time are some version of one of those 7 plots. I can't remember. It's the hero goes on a journey, or a stranger comes to town, and a couple of other things. And everything from Star Wars to Citizen Kane, you know, it fits into one of those seven archetypes, I suppose. So I
I
think the
wish
trick is to differentiate yourself within that sandbox or within that plot, and I think you do that with character.
I wish I could impress you and pull up that reference. And I know the minute we hang up, I'm going to recall it. You know, it's like Aristotle or Joseph Campbell or something. But
Mm,
we're both tracking the same thing. And I love that idea. And it's not much different. And I've only been studying this recently. And I had a conversation with a friend recently. We're talking about the prolific audience for romance. And when you look at romance, you know, boy meets girl or boy meets boy or girl meets girl or whatever that thing is. But there's like about what, 9, maybe 10 tropes. And they all stories are just basically moving in and around those tropes. And it's much like what you're saying. But I'm
mm.
telling you, Thomas, you friggin' nailed it. You nailed it. This is my favorite debut book easily of this year. It's going to be in the top 3, at least, of since I've started the show, and we're about to hit 4 years in 1 week.
Wow, thank you very much. And I know how many books you read, so that is very high praise. Thank you very much. I'm a bit speechless, actually.
Well, and I mean it with all sincerity. I really try to keep I don't try to be verbose or, you know, silly, because when I read a book that I go, I mean, I remember let me see, let me do this. Wednesday's quiet. He doesn't look like much. And now the 2 guys sitting across the table are wondering if he's ready to take down an armored truck. You could stop right there and go, okay, what is about to happen? And then it just gets better and better and better. And I love the way that you have this. It's like I thought of tennis. It's like you're volleying back between Thomas and Wynn. You're going back and forth, and it's 2 different uh, POVs. And I didn't even know I liked that style so much until I've read a couple of other books, but this one really jumps out at me. Like, so you get his viewpoint of his world. And of course, this guy and the world around him involves that. But then you get this voice of this guy and his world. And it's so deftly done.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's always tricky to pull those types of stories. I've got a writer friend who calls it an arrow book or an arrow structure, where you have the two plots kind of running parallel, but then starting to converge. And I mean, without any spoilers for my book, once they meet, and I've had a couple of readers get in touch with me and said, "Oh, that one chapter where it becomes." I'm trying very hard not to spoil it, but once they essentially converge, they said, "Oh wow, that was the bit, that was the part of the book where I just fist pumped, and that was it for them." And that was definitely by design from me. So
It goes into booster rockets at that point. You know,
Mm.
you kind of know it's coming, but that scene where they happen upon one another, we'll leave it at that. And I'm like, oh shit, here we go. And then it's like off to the friggin' races. And I
Mm.
cannot say enough. As we get to wrap, because we're gonna have to bounce here. We're a little bit over time, but I want to know what's in the works next. Is there a sequel? Is there a different spin? Is there a TV series? Is there a film? Talk to me, Thomas.
I mean, next for me in terms of the novels, I've got a science fiction project that's coming up soon. The publisher keeps pushing me to finish, but I'm slow and steady and careful. And as you mentioned, in terms of the detail and having that writing style, which is rich and full of allusions and references to things, that becomes a lot harder when you're setting a book several hundred years in the future in space. But I like to think it's almost like Dark Neon Dirt, but in space. It's very similar in terms of the style and the language, and it is science fiction, but I'd say it's like a crime thriller, political espionage type of thing. But yeah, set in the far future, shall we say? In terms
Well,
of a sequel, again, without spoiling anything, I think this one has an ending which I don't know. Some people think that it's a little bit more ambiguous or open to continue, depending on. I guess it also depends on what the reader brings to the table.
you instill in me a desire. I'm one of those guys that, in case nobody knows this about me, I'm not a big fan of rules. I'm not big on following rules, probably my upbringing.
I never would
And
have guessed.
yeah. And I'm an entrepreneur by spirit, but not by bank account, because if it was by bank account, there's about a half dozen books I've read this year that I would grab, snag the rights to, and then do everything I could to put it into development as either a TV series or a film, because I am, as you know, a filmmaker, a closet filmmaker. I mean, I
Mm,
have done a film in the past. God, I'd love to get my hands on this. And if I could afford it, I would buy the rights.
thank you. Yeah, a lot of people have said the same thing. I think it's obviously the setting and the story and the dialogue. It's really all there. So from your lips to God's ears.
Yes. May she listen closely. I do want to say, and if you, I'm going to sound like I'm patting myself on the back, I don't mean that, but I remember when I read Don Winslow's selection of short stories. I believe it was called Broken. There was
Hmm.
one when I was reading it, there were two of my favorites, but one, it burned a hole through my brain. And I said to him, I'm like, if I had the money, I would snatch the rights to this, because it has to be a movie. And wouldn't you
Is it
know, of
is it Crime 101?
it's Crime 101.
Yep, yeah, I knew it. That story. I was talking about it with someone earlier because it was a review of my book and it was very kind and thoughtful, and they mentioned, all the Elmore Leonard, the Heat, but they mentioned specifically Crime 101. And I said yes,
Crime.
because that really was one of the. It was definitely the best thing in that collection, and it was one of the best things that Don Winslow's ever written, which is saying something. So,
I could not agree more. It was the best. It is handcrafted for a film. It
mm,
was the perfect length. You got everything you wanted in the story. Of course, then you walked away and go, oh man. It was like, I want to say like 180 pages, maybe, not even that. And I was
no,
like,
I think
oh, this,
it was short. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It just, like, oh God. Anyway, and so it got picked up, and I would
Oh,
impress
it
you with the,
did.
yes,
Okay.
it got
Wow.
picked up. Oh, it's in production. Matter of fact, hold on a second. Now I've got to do this. Crime 101 in production. I can do this
Oh,
because it's my
great.
show. Hold on, ladies and gentlemen. Crime 101 is an upcoming crime fiction directed by Bart Layton, who co-wrote the screenplay with Peter Strawn. It is an adaptation of Don Winslow novella. Crime 101 stars, check this out, my friend, Chris Hemsworth, Mark Ruffalo, Barry Keoghan, Halle Berry, and Monica Barbaro.
That's a
Jennifer
cast and
Jason
a
Leigh,
half. Yeah, I like
Nick
that.
Nolte, Tate Donovan. I mean, come on.
Did you say Barry
I called
Keoghan
it.
was in there?
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yes. Dude, I'm telling you, it's going to make so much money. And my good friend Shane Salerno at the Story Factory put that deal together. Big surprise there.
Hmm.
Yeah. Well, okay, listen, I got to wrap it up. I do have one last question. You know what do I always close the show with?
Writing
It's three
advice?
words. Yes, best writing advice. Do you have any for me? I mean, I know you're brand new-ish. You have several short stories, which we didn't even cover, but we will another time. This
Yeah,
is your
yeah,
debut.
absolutely.
What have you learned in your years of fine writing, young man?
Well, one of the things that I picked up, and I wish I could remember who said this, and if they ever hear this, please let me know, because I definitely want. This is not an original idea from my head, and it is more to do with screenplays. But they were saying that, with any genre thing, and it goes back to what I was saying about characters, you can't rely on the genre thing, so the alien, the monster, or whatever, to provide all the conflict and the drama. You need something there to, so that the genre thing will just, like you mentioned, will just be like a turbo boost to an unfolding conflict already. I think the example they used was Die Hard. which we think of as one of the greatest action films of all time. But they said, actually, if you look at Die Hard, how does it open? It's a story about a couple, and the woman's moved to Los Angeles, and the Bruce Willis character, I mean, he's a New York guy through and through. And so it's actually a story about their disintegrating marriage. There's like an inequality between them in terms of their earning power and so forth. And she's relocating, and he's anxious about the whole thing, and he's not really comfortable in Los Angeles with these 1980s yuppies and so forth. And so you think, right, it's a in just in that encapsulated bit, it's a conflict about marital drama. But then Hans Gruber shows up, and boom, we're in Die Hard. And I think you can apply that to a lot of other action films. If they're successful, there's always something else that is there before the terrorist or the alien or whatever shows up to kick the story up a notch. So I think that's always, it's certainly advice that I always tell myself. I think with my book, it's slightly different because it opens with a bang, but then you have to gradually filter in the characters and why we should care about them and why we should feel invested in them as the story goes along. So I think that's probably the one thing, especially if you're writing crime fiction or thrillers. And again, it goes back to that thing about, well, there's only so many amount of plots. So, you have to do something to help your book stand out. And I think that's probably it.
Well, you said a magic piece right there. It's all about the characters. If I am involved and engaged, I can be for or against. I can love or I can hate. I can love and hate simultaneously. I can be frustrated. But if I am engaged with the characters first and foremost, regardless of anything else, whether it's style or length or cover or whatever bullshit else is out there, I'm in. And that's the way it should be. Just to piggyback on.
I don't believe in that thing where the protagonists or your characters have to be likable. I don't find that's true at all. In my book, you've got a bad guy who's kind of likable, and you've got the good guy who's actually more of a bad guy. And people have said, "Oh, I read this book and I wasn't sure how to feel about this guy. He was good, then he was bad," and but I think as long as you're engaged, that's the key thing.
Well, folks, don't forget the fact too that there are people in power. I'm just going to use that as a generic phrase. You may like that particular person in power, or you may not. You may agree with that particular person in power, or you may not. I'm not going to get into politics. I make it a rule not to do that. You could think he's an a-hole. You could think he's the greatest thing since sliced bread. But it comes down to, are you engaged with the person? Are you following the story? Anyway, point made. Hey, one quick thing, folks. I got to tell you this story because it's one of the things that really made a difference and drew my attention to Mr. Thomas Trang here. And again, I'm not tooting my horn. It's just, it's something that happened, and I want to share this story with you. And I'm going to say it as though Thomas isn't sitting there. This is when you know somebody is serious about their work. So I got the book, I started reading, I knew I was in, I went to his website, I found the website, it was a piece of shite. I mean, it was just crap.
Guilty as charged.
Yeah, and then I went to get his email address, and I'm like, oh, Jesus, his email address is not even his name. And I'm like, okay, what the frick? So, unbeknownst to him, and I took a chance on doing this, because he could look and be, who do you think you are, Temple? But I wrote him an email. I carved out a bit of time on my weekend to do this. And I'm like, hey, Thomas, I know we don't know each other. You're going to be on the show. Just a couple of things. Your website sucks. And then I said, hey, here's a website company I just learned about. It's not expensive. You can build it in a flash, literally, and not flash code, but flash fast. And P.S., get rid of that friggin' email that sends you to your publisher. No, it's not Shotgun Honey, it's somebody else. And here's a suggestion. Folks, not only did he rebuild the website, sign up an email account. He did it in 24 hours. The next day he said, hey, check this out. Boom, it was done. I was so impressed with that because a lot of times people ask me advice. David, what kind of microphone do I need? What kind of light do I need? You know, how do I get a piece of equipment to make myself sound better or whatever? And I'll sit there, I'll spend notes and an hour crafting stuff and they'll never do anything. But the fact that you took that advice, did it, just told me so much about you. So all of that is to say kudos to you, not to me, but to you.
Thank you. No, I mean, it's, I'm always willing to listen to advice. It doesn't necessarily mean I'll follow it, but I knew the website that I had wasn't the greatest. It's not my area of expertise. Obviously, I'm a writer. I'm not a web designer or a marketer or any of that stuff. And I think certainly until I was a published author, I just, I'll worry about that. You know, I'll cross that bridge when I come to it. And then, wouldn't you know, I came to the bridge and I was still on the same shitty website. And you said, look, and you were very polite, more than you needed to be. You said, tell me if I'm talking out of turn. And I said, look, David, I know the website's not the greatest. And it was just the kick in the pants that I needed. And you're right. It was actually a lot easier than I thought it would be to clean up and have it looking very slick and professional. ThomasTrang.com. So it's all there. You can sign up get in touch with me. There's all my books, different stories, different interviews and things of that nature that I've done. So it's all there in the one slick, snazzy place.
And how about that email service?
Yeah. That's perfect. So that goes, there's a contact page on the website and it goes straight to the new address.
Yeah, and it's highly secure. They're based out of Switzerland. Anyway, I was going to say, I'm not going to rain on anybody's parade. When I first came out as an author, I hired this particular company and they were a sponsor for a short while. It was very expensive. They're nice people. They really are. You don't need to drop that kind of cash for a website. And honestly, if you ever want to know as a listener what to do, contact me. I'll help you out. And I'm not getting any kickbacks from this. Anyway, Thomas Trang, I cannot say enough nice things. Dark Neon Dirt is the book. It is riveting. This is a book, folks, you have got to buy. I know I'm late to the party. I say that often. I heard about this in March. I just happened to be stacked. I got a few things going on in my life, and I'm sorry I'm late to the game, but boy, am I glad I'm there because, as Nick Kolakowski, mutual friend here, says, fast and smooth and incredible heist novel. You're going to want to pick this up and read it. And if you ever want to do an audiobook, count me in because I would be honored to jump on that board and make it into
I am thinking about an audiobook. My wife has been on my case about it because she only read the book probably about the same time that you did, David. She only read it when it was available in paperback. And a couple of other writers I know have mentioned that. And they said, wait, your wife never read it before it was published? I said, no, it's crime fiction. It's not really her thing. They were shocked. They're like, my wife wouldn't even let me leave the house without a shopping list that was, approved by her. But and it wasn't until she started reading it that I thought, I'm actually quite anxious that she'll enjoy it. And she did, thankfully. And she's not one to, if she didn't like it, she wouldn't mince words.
Yeah.
But, again, it came down to the characters, I think, because she thought it's a crime thriller. There'll be explosions and ninjas jumping out of bushes and all this sort of stuff. And there is an element of that, but it comes down to the characters. And there's romance too. So
yeah. You get it all, folks, in 300 pages, which is, I'll tell you, he's nailing it. Get him on the show for crying out loud. It's just, it's a perfect book. There's not a wasted bit in there. All right. Want to learn more, as you just heard from him, and he beat me to it, thomastrang.com. Thomas, please tell me you'll come back on the show again.
Absolutely. I had great fun. Thank you.
Was I right? Well, you haven't read the book yet, but you will. Dark Neon Dirt, you're going to read it. Thanks, Thomas. I think I got a new buddy. Folks, welcome to June. And guess what? We launch season 9. That's next week. with one of my favorite authors, the beautiful, the talented, the lovely, the charming. She is a master craftsperson. Megan Abbott, Eldorado Drive. Wow. Did you read The Turnout? Did you read any of her stuff? People cannot say enough nice things. Me either. Megan Abbott is a hell of a writer. There's some inside scoop on this particular book that you're going to want to hear about. You may not have heard it anywhere else, but you're going to hear it on The Thriller Zone, your number one podcast for thriller fiction. Oh, yeah. Join us next week as we kick off season 9 of The Thriller Zone. I'm going to scoot out of here. I'll talk to you next time for another edition of The Thriller Zone.